Hi, my name is Kira and welcome back to my channel. As you can tell from the title, this is my June TBR. I'm making a serious effort this month to choose more books based off my previous 5-star reads, which you can check out in this video right here. By making that video, I realized that 4 out of my 6 5-star reads are all magical realism, and that if I want to have more 5-star reads moving forward, I should probably be reading more magical realism books. Not every book on my June TBR is magical realism, however, because I do enjoy reading a variety of different kinds of books. So on my TBR, I have 11 different books. 5 of them are magical realism, 2 of them are mystery thriller, 2 of them are nonfiction, 1 of them is fantasy, and 1 of them is romance. This is kind of an aggressive TBR for me, so here's hoping I can actually get through a big chunk of these books this month. I'm going to talk about my nonfiction picks first this month because the first nonfiction book on my list has actually managed to jump every other book on my list and is something I know that I will definitely be picking up this month, and that is The Trainable Cat by John Bradshaw and Sarah Ellis. Last week I adopted a cat, which I'm not going to talk too much about right now because I do plan on making a whole video about it, but if you do want to know more, you can read a story I wrote about it on Medium, which I'll link down below. I picked up The Trainable Cat because I wanted to make sure my new cat is well adjusted. He's got a very friendly temperament, but I'd really like to be able to trim his own nails and to teach him other tricks. He also does not get along well with other animals. He's had a few different homes before coming to my home, and from what I've heard, he's absolutely terrified of dogs, which is okay because he is the only pet in my household right now. But in the future, my partner and I are definitely interested in adopting a dog way off in the future. Could be a year, 2 years, 5 years from now. But when we get to that point, we do want to make sure we are sensitivity training our cat so that our cat will be ready for it. Another reason I wanted to train my cat is because I grew up with a cat, and that cat was a little bit of a monster. No one could pet him unless you were my mom. We had to take him to the vet to get his nails clipped, and at the vet he needed to be sedated to get his nails clipped, and I don't want that to be my cat. I'd like to have a very well-adjusted cat, and so I'm hoping this will be my first step in making that happen. The next nonfiction book on my TBR is The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. This was recommended to me by a friend after posting my 5-star reads video, and conveniently I actually already had it on my shelf because my boyfriend owned it. This isn't really something I would have picked up on my own. I'm not much of a nonfiction reader, and I'm definitely not much of a self-help reader, but I really like the title, and the title seems to match a lot that's going on in my life right now, and I'm really interested in hearing the author's perspective about that. I personally am going through a process of working on things that have scared me in the past, like publishing on Medium and like making a YouTube channel. So while I wouldn't describe my current endeavors as not giving a fuck, I would say it is pretty similar to the process I've been going through in order to not be afraid of putting myself out there. Hi there. Now I'm going to talk about the one fantasy book on the list, and that is Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. I do really like fantasy, however, I find it a little bit intimidating to pick up books that are part of a pretty big series. The last fantasy book I read was The Eye of the World from the Wheel of Time, and it kind of turned me off from reading fantasy for a little while, although that might not be the book's fault. I find fantasy books take a lot of brain power to get through, and as a full-time elementary school teacher and also a grad school student at the same time, I don't have a lot of brain power left over when all of my tasks are over for the week. I've never read a Sanderson book before, but with the recent Kickstarter, I felt super inspired to pick up a Sanderson book. Mistborn looked like it was a little bit shorter than the others, although it's a pretty heavy paperback, and it's still over 600 pages, but that's still kind of short for a fantasy book, I guess. This book is supposed to have a really cool fantasy system that's based off consuming metals, and it's also a heist novel, which probably means that it's going to be moving at a lightning fast pace, which I think right now, if I'm gonna pick up a fantasy book, I think I need that really fast pace. So I'm really looking forward to picking this up, and hopefully at the end of it, I will be a new member of the Brandon Sanderson fan club. The first mystery thriller on my TBR is Her Every Fear by Peter Swanson. In May, I read The Kind Worth Killing, also by Peter Swanson, and I really enjoyed that book, hence why Her Every Fear has made it onto my TBR. The first chapter of this book was at the end of that one, and as soon as I read it, I knew I was gonna pick it up. Her Every Fear, just like The Kind Worth Killing, is set in Boston, and if you don't already know, I live in Boston. So when the first chapter of the book kicks off with the main character Kate being trapped in traffic in the Sumner Tunnel, which is a tunnel that runs underneath the Boston Harbor, I found the book already to be ridiculously relatable. In the story, Kate comes to Boston from London following a near-death traumatic experience with her ex-boyfriend and hopes that getting away from London is going to ease some of her anxieties. She ends up doing an apartment swap with her distant cousin, and she's going to stay in his Boston apartment. But once she gets to his apartment, she realizes that his next-door neighbor has just been murdered and her cousin is a prime suspect. I really loved The Kind Worth Killing, so if Her Every Fear is anything like that with all of the different twists and turns, I know I'm gonna really like this book and all of its Bostonian vibes as well. The second mystery thriller on my TBR is Confessions by Kane Minato. This is a translated work from Japanese and it's translated by Stephen Snyder. I'm picking up this book because it is the June pick for the Books in Lala's Literally Dead book club, and in one of her videos she said she expected it to be pretty similar to They Never Learned by Lane Fargo, which is a book that I just read and I really enjoyed it, so I'm looking forward to this one as well. This is the story of a middle school teacher who gives one last lesson to her middle school class after the tragic death of her daughter. What she tells them upends everything they know about two of their classmates and sets into motion an epic plot of revenge. This book is the shortest book on the list at 240 pages, and as a teacher, I am super excited to pick up a book where a teacher is the main protagonist. If you know any other teacher-centered books, especially in the mystery thriller genre, please let me know because I'm dying to read more. This book is supposed to be twisty and turny, and I just can't wait to pick it up. The romance on the list is It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. I've never read a Tessa Bailey before, but I know a lot of people really love her work, and it feels like the perfect place to start. It Happened One Summer is apparently directly inspired by the character Alexis from Schitt's Creek, but I've never seen Schitt's Creek, although a lot of people have told me that they think I would really like it, so I'm really excited to check out this book. This book follows Piper, a spoiled influencer slash heiress who lives her life however she wants until one day her stepfather has had enough, and he decides she needs to prove she's willing to work by going and taking over her late father's dive bar in a small town far from Beverly Hills. While there, she meets a handsomely gruff sea captain who also doubts her willingness to work, and Piper decides she's gonna prove everyone wrong. I love a good romance. I think there's nothing better than laying in the sun with a good romance book, and this book literally starts at a roof deck party, so I can't think of a better book to bring up to my own roof deck. I've never read this type of trope before, but I'm really into the proving everyone wrong through working hard trope, so I'm really excited to give it a go. The next 5 books on my list are all magical realism, and I think if there are any books that I'm probably not going to read this book, it would probably come from this category just because there are so many of them on my list. But even if I don't get to them this month, I will definitely be reading them in the future. 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez is widely accepted as the book that defined the genre of magical realism. Though I'm pretty intimidated as its status as a classic, this book is touted as one of the best of its kind. Set in a fictional and completely isolated Colombian town, 100 Years of Solitude follows the same family over multiple generations as their town is slowly revealed to outsiders. Marquez writes about the real-life civil wars and political unrest he experienced growing up in these countries. This book includes depictions of civil wars and massacres from colonists, but are deconstructed and reframed through a lens of magical realism. In this story, odd magical happenings occur and the characters just accept their presence, like a woman who floats away and a man who is followed everywhere by butterflies. I am super eager to read 100 Years of Solitude because I think it's pretty clear to me that this book might be the direct inspiration for a book that's later on in the list, and possibly even Disney's Encanto. 100 Years of Solitude is supposed to be a pretty challenging read, although from everything I've heard about it, it seems to be very worth it. But just like I said about the fantasy book, it might be pretty challenging and take up more brain power than I'm willing to give. So I very much see myself pushing this book off until my summer break off from school. Kafka on the Shore by Haruki Murakami. As 1Q84 by the same author is my favorite book of all time, I'm desperately wanting to read more Murakami books in the hopes of recapturing the magic I felt when I read that one. I've actually tried to pick up this book one time before and it just wasn't the right time to read it. I could feel after the first few pages. However, I feel a particularly strong draw to this book right now because according to the blurb on the back, in this world, cats can talk and fish fall from the sky. As I mentioned earlier, I just adopted a cat this week, so reading a book where cats can talk seems right up my alley right now. Come on. Gentle. Oh, you can hardly see him. Gentle. Look at the camera. Oh. Kafka on the Shore is a murder mystery and an epic journey all wrapped up into one. The lives of the two main characters are intertwined by fate, and we get to watch as they directly change their destinies. I'm sure there's more to the description of this book, but with this one and with the other Murakamis on the list, and kind of with magical realism in general, a lot of times knowing the magical realism element of the book is a bit of a spoiler, and I'd like to go in it as blind as possible because I think the surprise is part of the charm. The second Murakami book on my TBR is A Wild Sheep Chase. Murakami has written over 20 books, and after some pretty extensive research, I've determined that this book seems to be the most similar in vibes to 1Q84. A top review on Goodreads for this book states that reading Murakami is like experiencing someone else's dream, and if that's not exactly what you're trying to get out of magical realism, then you're probably taking on the wrong genre. In this story, an unnamed main character goes on a detective-esque romp in search of a mysteriously marked sheep for a mad professor. It's hard to learn any more without spoiling myself, and truthfully, I don't really think this story needs any more introduction. If you've yet to read a Murakami magical realism, this might be a good choice because it's 350 pages, whereas 1Q84 is 3 times that length. The Inheritance of Orquídea Divina by Zoraida Cordova has been sitting on my shelf for way too long at this point, especially considering I have heard nothing but absolutely fantastic things about this book. This is a story of a family matriarch who, having lived her entire life with magic, invites her family to her own funeral where she is mysteriously transformed into a tree. After Orquídea's transformation, some of her family members have inherited her magical gifts, and they begin to make sense of their new realities. Not long after, however, they're faced with a mysterious force who would like to see Orquídea's powers gone for good, leaving her 4 descendants with more questions than answers. I have heard nothing but fantastic things about this book, and I know based off reading the first chapter that the prose could not be more beautiful. It's not that long either, it's only 330 pages, so I anticipate this being a really cozy read-in or even a good beach read. And finally, the last book on my TBR is I Crawl Through It by A.S. King. I'm picking up I Crawl Through It because I was really reminiscing about Dig while I was filming my 5-star reads video, and I'm a little bit confused and upset with myself about why I haven't picked up another A.S. King book since then. I Crawl Through It is magical realism, but it's also YA, so it shouldn't be too tricky to get through, and that also makes it the perfect addition to tack on to the end of a pretty overwhelming TBR. Just like some of the other magical realism books on this list, I don't know a whole lot about the story because I think basic plot points can really spoil a lot of the books, but I do know that this book is about a few different teenagers who are navigating the stressors in their life without getting too much help from the adults around them. That is it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing, and let me know down in the comments if you've ever read any of the books on my TBR or if you're planning to read them soon, or let me know what's on your June TBR. Thanks for watching.